Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Friday, May 21st, 2021. And our top story today, can blockchain revolutionize tax administration? Well, joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Orly Mazer. She's an associate professor of law at SMU's Dedman School of Law. Orly, thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Of course, it's my pleasure. I love talking about blockchain, so I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. And this is exciting because, and we're going to talk about this in the second segment, we'll get into kind of the nuts and bolts of your recent research paper, but let's kind of set this up because our audience has probably heard the term blockchain. We've talked a lot about cryptocurrency on the network. What is your definition, or how do you define what a blockchain is?
Sure. So you can just think of blockchain as a type of digital database or digital ledger, right? It's a way to collect data, store data, and share data. So for all sorts of transactions and assets, you can do for a wide variety of things. But it's different than your typical database for several reasons, right? One, it's a distributed digital ledger. So it means the database is not stored at a single location, but rather it's replicated and shared among everyone participating in the network. So each authorized participant all hold the exact same copy of the database at all times. The second big difference is that before a transaction or digital event can even be added to this database, to this ledger, it has to be validated by the authorized network users. Now, there's different ways to do this. It's called a consensus mechanism or consensus method, but it's just a way to authenticate the information before it's input into the system, without using a third party or a middleman to do it. Instead, it's done peer-to-peer by the authorized network users. And it's great because it gets rid of the need to having an intermediary or a third party. And then once validated, the information is entered, it's aggregated together with other authorized information into a block, and it's added into the ledger as a block. And that block is encrypted. It's in this cryptographic form. If you looked at it, you would know what it means. And it's linked to the previous blocks. And what that does is it makes it really difficult, or pretty much impossible, to delete information that was previously entered into the ledger. And so all of these benefits just pose tremendous potential for our economy and for businesses.
Yeah, and so I want to touch on I just want to hit on the security aspect of this. You know, we just here in I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, in the Southeast, we just went through the Colonial Pipeline hack and disrupted gas supplies, oil supplies, all that kind of horrific stuff really put our economy here in Charlotte and other parts of the Southeast into disarray. I think you really touched on this, but I just want to reiterate, I mean, the blockchain, it's encrypted, and it really avoids some of these things that we're kind of going through today with security, correct?
So yes and no. So blockchain, it currently, the way it's still in its infancy, but what it really does is once you have the authorized data that enters onto the blockchain, again, it's encrypted, you can't modify it. The problem is we still have human error and human involvement, right? Who holds these private data keys? Humans. And you still have that element that causes a lot of these problems. So while blockchain does have the potential to solve for a certain aspect of data security, it's not mature enough to prevent enterprise security breaches like the Colonial Pipeline. And what I mean is that most breaches, again, occur when their computers are hacked, their private keys are stolen, they allow malicious software onto their computer, right? They click on a malicious link. All of that stuff can still happen. And that's more of what happened with the Colonial Pipeline, was there was this malicious breach rather than the encrypted information not being encrypted correctly. And so blockchain, again, can help. It's very specific in the way it can help, but not for that. It can help, though, I will say, because of its traceability, perhaps figure out who was the assailant, where did this input come in, but it will not necessarily solve what happened with the Colonial Pipeline.
Thanks for that, Orly. And, you know, and as I said in the intro to this segment, I think our people kind of equate Ethereum Ripple, Bitcoin, those are major cryptocurrencies, and that this blockchain technology really undergirds that. It is the underlying technology, but and we're gonna, and I don't want to spoil, but I'll tease it a little bit. We're going to talk about how this can apply to taxation and tax administration. But where is blockchain being used today other than these major cryptocurrencies?
Sure. So you're right. The cryptocurrency is the first application of blockchain that we've seen, and it's been so successful and so widespread. And like you said, blockchain is just the application that underlies it. So some people think cryptocurrency is blockchain, but blockchain is much more than that. And it has a lot of potential outside of that. So one of the industries where we're seeing the most development and the most use cases, unsurprisingly, is the financial industry, right? Because just like cryptocurrency, it involves a lot of payments. And so there have been a lot of use cases there, for instance, for things like streamlining the clearing and settlement of securities, to improve the efficiency of anti-money laundering things like the know your customer regulations that are in place. It helps make that a lot more efficient. Use cases include payment, include just a lot of other ways to make that industry more efficient with the way that payments are transferred. But beyond that, we've seen use cases in real estate. So a private global real estate platform recently automated a whole real estate purchase by allowing the parties to just fully execute and record a residential transaction on its blockchain platform. So it's pretty exciting. Everything is really new. Some other examples, the healthcare industry is extremely interested in blockchain, and we're trying to find ways for how can we record, manage, and secure all of our healthcare data, right? How can we share patient records instead of you having to fill out that form every time you go to the doctor? How do we just share that efficiently, securely, and make that process more efficient? So there's a lot of work trying to improve the transparency and data integrity of those records. You see it in, for instance, like supply tracing and authentication. So you buy a Chanel purse, is it really Chanel, or is this a false product? Is this a fake? There's ways to use blockchain to track those assets and show where did it originate, where did it go in the process, and is it an actual product that it claims to be? So a lot of uses. The thing that I'd want to emphasize is that this is still in its infancy. There's a bunch of cases being developed. They're in various stages of development. Some have been executed, but we haven't yet quite seen mainstream adoption where this is being for public use and everyone's using it. It's very small and within companies and still growing, but I think it has a lot of potential to have more mainstream adoption.
Yeah. Well, you certainly have to start somewhere, and Rome wasn't built in a day. It fell pretty fast, but it wasn't built in a day. Orly, we're going to take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about how blockchain could be applied to tax administration, make it a lot more efficient. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit Repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. We're talking to Orly Mazer, who is an associate professor of law at SMU's Dedman School of Law. Orly, thanks so much for staying with us this morning.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
Well, we appreciate the quick lesson. You're a professor. We appreciate the quick lesson on blockchain, its applications. Now let's talk about one in particular, and that's tax administration. We just passed, your paper was perfectly timed because we just passed tax day. We all had to pay our state, federal, local taxes. But blockchain can really be applied to really streamline the tax administrative process. What did you mean what's the thesis of the paper, I should ask?
Sure, that's right. So my recent paper called Can Blockchain Revolutionize Tax Administration, it considers, can blockchain be used to help modernize our tax administration system? So given that it was just tax day, I think you would all agree that our tax system can be quite costly and inefficient to administer. How much time did you spend compiling all those records to file your taxes? And if you didn't do that, you probably had to compile all those records to give it to your accountant and pay money for someone else to file. Right? So not only is it costly, it's extremely time consuming, very, very labor intensive, but we are in the 21st century. Why isn't it more digitalized? Why isn't it more automated? Why do I have to get that 1099 from my employer and then manually input it into the system and the IRS gets the same copy? It makes no sense. This should all just automatically flow onto our tax returns, right? So one of the major challenges of our current system is just that it's so inefficient and costly to administer. And not just from a taxpayer perspective, but also from the tax authorities' perspective. They have to spend a lot of time and money verifying that what we put is correct, engaging in these dispute resolution procedures, spend money trying to collect money that they haven't collected. Just a lot of inefficiencies that blockchain and other technologies could really help address. In addition, our current tax system has a huge tax gap. What that means is that's the difference between how much tax liability you owe and how much you actually pay. And we have a significant tax gap, which means, of course, lost government revenues that could be used for all these purposes, and it undermines the integrity of our tax code and has other negative ramifications. Now, a big cause of this tax gap, of this taxpayer noncompliance, is information asymmetry. And what I mean is that when we report our taxes, we self-report, and the government is relying on what we say is the amount of tax that we owe. And the government often can't verify that information unless it spends a lot of money, and it does so after the fact. And so blockchain potentially in the future as it matures can help us with that as well. And the way it can help us is because it helps us authorize each transaction as it occurs and store it and share it between the taxpayer and the government when it's authorized to view that information. And so by having this all in one place, it makes our life easier. It can automatically flow onto your tax return. And it also reduces the need for audits and things like that because it's been verified at the point that it was input into the system. So a lot of potential to hopefully reduce the amount of time we have to pay when we file our taxes in the future.
Yeah, and what does an implementation look like? So let's just say a local government or an entity wants to create something like this, how difficult is it to implement a blockchain, begin to digitize these records? I grew up in the days of facsimiles, and then now we scan everything, and digitization to me means OCR codes and scanning. But how do we get from where we are today and actually implement that in our kind of older technology systems?
So that is a great question. And if I could give you the perfect answer, I think I would be a millionaire right now because I could develop it. But to be honest with you, this question is really difficult to answer. And the reason it's so difficult is that this technology is still in its infancy, and a lot has to happen before we get to point A, where we are today, to what I'm envisioning in the future. So it's hard to tell you how would an implementation look like. It depends on things like, one, what type of blockchain system would the government eventually adopt? Is it a public, permissionless blockchain like Bitcoin, where the whole public network is involved in validating transactions? Or is it, which most likely I think would be either a private or a hybrid blockchain method that's partly permission, meaning only authorized parties are involved in the network? But more than that, more needs to happen for this system to really work, for us to be able to really trace transactions and track them and enter them efficiently onto this sort of blockchain-powered platform. One, we need a system that's interoperable among all the different systems that you and I use, that businesses use, that the different government agencies use. So we need blockchain to evolve for there to be one or two or a few main blockchain systems, like the underlying infrastructure. Sort of like what you think of with the internet, which HTTP, right? We have that code, that bottom system that underlies all of our internet searches. We need something like that with blockchain, and we're not there yet. I also strongly believe that we need a digital currency, because digital currency is traceable, and that allows us to see, did the money come from where the taxpayer claims it came? And so there has been a lot of movement in governments worldwide looking into what's called centrally backed digital currencies. And something like that would really help propel having blockchain in this kind of implementation. We really need something like that. And so a lot still has to happen. But from a taxpayer perspective, once this is eventually in place, ideally it would be seamless. Like for you and me, we would just enter in our information. We would log on to this blockchain-powered platform. It would be just like logging onto a website, and all our information would be there. And so I don't know if I'm saying so much, but I want to say that Estonia is probably the most advanced in this respect. And so if you want an example of what implementation would look like, I would look to Estonia. They have almost all of their government services online. They store all of their government data on a blockchain-powered system platform. And from a user perspective, it saves you so much time and so much money, and you don't know it's based on blockchain. So the answer to your question is actually really technical, Jeff. But hopefully that gives you an understanding of where we are and where we need to go.
Yeah. It just seems like, in terms of the citizen, you're always asking, what am I getting for my money? If things are a lot more efficient on the local government level, that would be a boon. And now you can focus on, instead of like paperwork, you can focus on actually delivery of local, state, and federal services. Last question. In terms of, I think you alluded to some of this in your previous comments, but just to kind of tie a nice bow around it, where are we with policymakers at the federal, state, local level? Is there, I read all the time at how central banks are looking at digital assets, digital currency. So clearly they're engaged in terms of what this means for monetary policy and money, pure money, as it relates to money. But what in terms of policymakers in the adaptation of the blockchain, the public-private blockchain, where do they stand in terms of, the policymakers stand in terms of evaluation and moving forward?
So that's a great question, and it depends right on where we're looking at. I would say the U.S. is among the slower adopters in this area. I'm seeing a lot more movement in Europe, in China, and Asia than in the U.S. So there is a lot of interest by policymakers I think it was last year, there was a few bills that were proposed to Congress to try to encourage, let's study blockchain. Let's see what we can do to make more use of it in the public space. And then, of course, we had the pandemic, which slowed everything down. But there is government interest. For instance, I mentioned earlier the healthcare industry. There's a lot of movement there trying to figure out how to use blockchain right for public use in the healthcare industry. There's a lot of research being done. For instance, also the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention are exploring the use of blockchain to help track public outbreaks like hepatitis A or COVID-19. So there's a lot of potential, but you're not seeing from the government perspective a lot of use cases. It's more coming from private parties, from developers who are then trying to pitch it, but not a lot of adoption yet at the government level. And I think we know that government is usually slower to act. And so it's no exception in this case. And I'm optimistic that they'll jump on board and get to where we need to go, because to really have mainstream adoption, we need government adoption of this technology. But again, if you look at places like Europe, you'll see a lot more. They have a lot of studies going on, a lot of public-private collaborations where they're trying to develop the use of blockchain. They're doing these limited pilot projects at the government level, and all of that is helping move it forward. Still a long way to go, but still definitely more that the US needs to do in order to bring it here to us.
Yeah, well, it's certainly exciting times. There's so much revolutionary technology. I think we're, obviously a lot of it implemented during the pandemic, and it's going to be interesting to see with the growth of cryptocurrency, the growth of the underlying blockchain technology, how governments can actually implement this, and also corporations, to make their processes much more efficient. Orly, we're going to have to leave it there. Really appreciate you coming on the program, and we look forward to discussing this with you and having you back on very soon.
It was my pleasure. I enjoyed talking about blockchain, and hopefully y'all learned something new.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, then drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Don't forget, we're back again tomorrow for our weekly retrospective show, BRN Weekly. We'll have a very special guest, and then we'll take a look at some of our best segments for the week. You're not going to want to miss it. So until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Are you being audited and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a Tax Doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.